And again, welcome back. Columbia Public Library is where we are tonight for the League of Women Voters Forum. There will be another one a week from tomorrow. More about that as we wrap up tonight. But we have one more segment to do tonight, and that is for the 19th District Senate candidate. Stephen Webber is the Democrat. Caleb Rowden is the Republican. The 19th District includes Boone and Cooper counties, and we are going to get started. And I can tell you that we are going to have a lot of questions for these men because they've already come up. And I think it's going to be a good conversation. We will, those of you who are very sticklers for time, we will be giving them a little bit more than we did the state representatives. League feels like that is appropriate because these two men, one of them will represent the 19th District, which is all of us, and it's not divided up into the groups that we've had here where just part of Columbia or Boone County would be represented by any of the representatives from 44, 46, or 47. So we'll start again with the Democrat candidate, and that is Stephen Webber. You have 2 minutes in your opening statement.
My name is Stephen Webber. Thank you all very much for having me. I grew up here in Columbia. I actually started at kindergarten about 100 yards here across the street at Grant Elementary School. When I was 17, I was finishing up my Eagle Scout project with Boy Scout Troop 707. And the project that I did was I interviewed local veterans, and I wrote up their stories, and I donated to the Boone County Historical Society. And at the time, I was amazed by how much people who lived in my own community had sacrificed for our community. And I didn't know that a matter of just months later, September 11th would happen and change all of our worlds. And when I saw that happen, I knew that it was my turn to step up and do something. And so I enlisted in the Marine Corps at the age of 19 and spent my early 20s going back and forth to Iraq. I did 2 tours in Iraq as a Marine infantryman. My second one was being a squad leader in the city of Fallujah. Fallujah was a very violent city. My unit was involved in quite a bit of combat. We lost a good number of friends killed and wounded there. But if there's one silver lining I could take from that, it was when I was in a situation where I didn't know from day to day how things were going to go. I really had an opportunity to understand what was important to me, what really mattered to me. And when I was in Fallujah, I wasn't sure what was going to happen from day to day. What was important to me was home, was Boone County, was coming back here and doing everything I could to make my place in the world as good as it can be. And that's why I'm running for the state senate. We are a town in an area that thrives on education, thrives on healthcare. They're not just our biggest employers, they're also our values. And those are the things that I want to fight for as your state senator here in the 19th District.
Thank you, Mr. Webber. Caleb Rowden, your opening statement, please.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much for the opportunity to be here. I really thoroughly have always enjoyed coming to this event. As I've said in years previous, knowing that most of what I say will get a few jeers from some folks, but it's always part of this process and part of what makes this community special is that we're engaged. I think part of what we've seen play out on the national scale has come from a large sector of our country that's just so angry and so disengaged that they throw up their hands and they give up. And the only way that this political environment gets better is when we engage, when we talk to people that we don't always agree with. And so for me, that's been a value of mine that I've held for the past 4 years. I got into this because I love this community. This community's been really, really good to me. I went to public school here. I graduated from Rockbridge. This is where I met my wife. It's where we are raising our family. I would probably already be in bed right now if I weren't here. But this is, that's why I do what I do. And certainly when I had my little guy, I think the reason why you run, the perspective that you have for running, the perspective that you have for when I think about what's going to make Willem's life better 10, 15, 20 years down the road, most of it isn't partisan. Most of it isn't what's the Democratic answer, what's the Republican answer. Most of it is finding ways to make investments back into the community, representing the district. That's what I've done. I'm proud of my record, and we'll talk about that. But it really is a pleasure and an honor to represent the people of Mid-Missouri, and it's a pleasure and honor to be here.
Next, we're going to ask, I have, I think, three questions, and there may be another one that somebody might want to hand in, but I think we've got three questions. We're going to talk about the University of Missouri. And first one from an audience member. How do you protect the University of Missouri from the threats posed by Missouri State University and posed by legislative leaders from Southwest Missouri? And we'll start with Stephen Webber on this one.
The first thing that we need to do is stop having the Boone County delegation attack the University of Missouri. I was always taught that the primary responsibility of a legislator from Boone County was to stand up for the flagship institution. And for some reason over the last few years, we've seen local representatives, we saw a local Republican representative say he wouldn't send his dog here. When local representatives are saying that, it makes it very difficult for us to defend the university around the rest of the state. Specifically, I think what this question is getting at is there's an effort to allow non-flagship institutions to offer terminal degrees, PhDs, without consulting with, or without trying to coordinate with the University of Missouri. This is designed to reduce duplication, to try to be efficient, and I think that I think we shouldn't change the law. I think that if the University of Missouri can handle it, I think other institutions should try to partner with the university first before going and creating a duplicate program somewhere else.
All right, the question again is for Caleb Rowden now. How do you protect MU or the University of Missouri system from the threats posed by Missouri State and some legislative leaders from that area?
Yeah, I think the answer is that you lead. So I was in the midst of that dialogue that was happening last year. I was on a number of conference calls with Mizzou supporters from Southwest Missouri who were telling us about some of these threats and telling us, what they were trying to accomplish. And so we got out ahead of it. I had an amendment draft. Part of this agreement was based on the agreement on these degrees was from the Missouri State renaming thing that happened about 10 years ago. I had an amendment drafted that was going to change the name of Missouri State back to Southwest Missouri State if they went down this road. Because those folks in Southwest Missouri, they want to go back on their word, and it was done in an attempt to hit Mizzou while they were down. And were it not for some proactive leadership, frankly, on the part of Republicans, it could have gotten a lot further than it did. So the way that you stand up for the University of Missouri is that you fight and you do what you need to do to make it happen.
I said we're going to have a couple of questions about MU, so here's another one, and Caleb Rowden will start on this one. As you see it, what is the core issue accounting for the strained relationship between the legislature and the University of Missouri? This is something that really started to steamroll and get a lot of momentum about a year ago now.
So I think you have a couple of different things. There are certainly pockets of people in rural Missouri who get all of their information about what has happened and transpired from the news. They're not here. They're not on the ground. I was on the campus, toured the campus the day after the hunger strikes ended. You have to be a proactive advocate and talking to those folks and say, look, the University of Missouri is not just good for my neck of the woods, but it's good for your neck of the woods as well. And so we've done a lot of that. And the folks in rural Missouri heard from a lot of their constituents, but the job of the Republican delegation or of the Boone County delegation is to fight. And that's what we did last year, and that's what I did last year. And I'm proud of the things that we were able to accomplish to push back some of these unnecessary threats against the University of Missouri.
And Stephen Webber, the same question as you see it. What's the core issue accounting for that strained relationship?
I would say there's two things. The university is a center of learning and knowledge. And there are a lot of people that are outright hostile to learning and knowledge. So, for example, the horrific comments that were mentioned by Senator Ed Emery here in Boone County earlier, where he said that he described being LGBT as a mental illness. That's not grounded in science. That's anti-science. Rejecting climate change is anti-science. And so we have an institution that's based in science and learning, and there are a lot of people that are against that in the legislature, and a lot of people from Boone County that won't stand up against that. Second, I think that a lot of the massive tax cuts pushed by major Republican donors are directly at odds with the ability to fund the university. And so the Republican supermajority is caught between some of their mega donors and doing what's best for the people of the state of Missouri and funding institutions that our students go to.
I understand that neither of you are in the committee that's going to be choosing the next University of Missouri system president, but I have a question for you about that. In your opinion, what type of University of Missouri system president would Jefferson City and or you like to see? Who would be the type of candidate and the selection that would help in some of the things you just talked about? And Stephen Webber, you're first on this one.
I think it's one of the most difficult decisions. I think a university president needs to understand the financial aspects, the academic aspects. There's so many different components to it. I think we need somebody that's going to be engaged, to be actively engaged. I think a lot of problems with university leadership resulted from people not being proactive in tackling problems head on early enough. And so I think whoever the next president is, I think she or he needs to be somebody who is eager to engage on tough issues and try to be aggressive in moving the university forward.
Caleb Rowden, what type of UM president should we see and Jefferson City would like to see?
Yeah, I think this can and should be, I think, a new day for the University of Missouri. And what I've told a lot of my colleagues in Jefferson City who have had issues with the university is, look, let's not be naive to think that some of these issues aren't happening on literally every other college campus around the country. We just got called out for it and got called out for it on a very, very public stage. And so now we are in front of it. And if we choose to respond the right way with the right leadership, the next governor is going to appoint 4 and maybe 5 new curators. This is a point of very crucial time for the university. And so if we can have somebody who has foresight, is proactive in saying this is the way higher education is moving, we can be on the front end of a lot of these changes and literally can move from being what we maybe the laughingstock of the nation in higher education last year. We can be the leader. I think that is a real possibility if we have a leader who's engaged and who sees some of those things and can get ahead of some of those challenges that we've seen in higher education.
Let's talk about ethics. And I had a question handed to me after the last House representative candidates were here. They all were addressing ethics. And we can ask you the same question I asked them. And Caleb Rowden, you'll go first. What's next in ethics that you would like to see changed in Jefferson City? But before you address that, I want both of you to say, this is a question that says, what kind of gifts are we talking about that people are getting from lobbyists in Jefferson City? And this is a good one for you because you're the only pair here where both of you have spent time in Jefferson City. So what kind of, this is a sincere question of saying, what are we talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think more times than not, it's a meal. There are other times where it's a lot of other things. It can be tickets to sporting events. It can be travel to conferences that have to deal with those specific industries. I'm proud of what we've been able to accomplish in the area of ethics reform. It's not easy to pass an ethics bill in Jefferson City because the reality is folks that don't want to see you succeed politically are going to try to downplay what you're accomplishing. And then there are other people who think you're going too far. And so, for me, the type of person that I've always been is I don't shy away from a fight. And so when they said that you can't pass ethics reform, you shouldn't even try. It's not politically expedient. You know what? I did it. And we got it done. Is it everything that I wanted? Absolutely not. But there's plenty left to do. I do think we need to ban lobbyist gifts. That was a bill that I've filed and a bill that I think as we move forward, there's more of an appetite for it and something that we can get across the finish line.
So Stephen Webber, the same two-part question, so I think we're a little bit generous on the time and because it's 2 parts. What kind of gifts are we talking about when we talk about lobbyist gifts, and also what's next, in your opinion, that really needs to be done in ethics reform?
Same on the lobbyist gifts part. I haven't met a single person in this entire campaign that thinks Jefferson City has taken ethics reform too far. I don't know anybody who thinks that. I think everybody agrees there's an ethics problem in Jefferson City. Catherine Hanaway, who was the former Republican Speaker of the House and ran for governor, described what the legislature did as lip service. Campaign finance reform is an enormous part of the ballgame. There's now regularly 6-figure checks, 7-figure checks coming into Missouri politics. And I've co-sponsored campaign finance reform every year that I've been in the legislature. It's something I strongly support. And if we're not talking about seriously tackling money in politics, we're not really seriously talking about the issue.
Well, then that leads to a question that I wanted to ask about that very issue. We'll start with Stephen Webber on this one. How much is it costing for you to run your campaign, and your thoughts about the inflation of paying for the campaign?
It's unbelievable how much it costs. Well over $1 million a piece. To put that into sort of context, I think in 2008, I think the candidates were spending around $500,000 or $600,000 a piece. So it's doubled or tripled. I suspect that we're going to see hundreds of thousands of dollars, or if not more than that, move in the next 4 weeks into the Senate district. And we're now spending about as much for a state Senate seat as statewide candidates were spending 4 years ago, and that needs to change. It's not right for our country. It needs to change, and the only way we can change that, you can't ask either side to unilaterally to disarm or to not raise money. The only thing we can do is pass campaign finance limits and try to change it for everybody.
I'm going to ask the same question for Caleb Rowden, but a follow-up for you first. How hard is it to be a senator as opposed to a fundraiser? You understand what I'm asking here. How much energy do you put into being a senator, and how much energy into raising money? And I know you're neither
I hope
one
I'll have a better
senator.
answer in 4 weeks.
I know neither one, but you can apply that to being a House of Representative member, or however you'd like to say that.
No, absolutely. It's tough to balance, and that's part of the reason that we need some serious campaign finance reform. When there's a donor that can write $1 million check or something like that, which has happened routinely in the state of Missouri, it takes a lot of phone calls of asking your friends and neighbors for $50 or $100 to try to match that, and that takes physically a lot of time. So I think that it's a hugely important issue.
So, Caleb Rowden, how much is it costing to run your campaign, and your thoughts about that cost that is associated with campaigning to be a state senator?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to spend a lot of money. You've seen both of our faces on TV a little bit, and you'll probably see us a little bit more. I think there's a couple things that you have to consider. I think Democrats use, I think, the campaign finance talking points pretty well. But here's the reality. In 2014, the biggest donor of large contributions was a Democrat. In 2014, the 2014 cycle, the biggest recipient of large contributions was a Democrat. Chuck makes a great point that if you're going to put significant campaign contributions in place, as we've seen at the federal level, you are welcoming the reality that the only type of person that will ever get elected again is someone who is rich. Otherwise, it's impossible for a guy like me or for a guy like Stephen to win a congressional seat anymore without the possibility of being able to inject a heck of a lot of your own money into your race. I believe we're probably going to have campaign contribution limits in Missouri post November 8th because there's a ballot measure that I presume is going to pass. But I just think you have to be mindful of that when you think about the pros and cons of, money in politics. It's an interesting discussion, but there are some cons when you talk about limiting speech in that way, and you just have to be mindful of that. And it's not a one-way street. This isn't the corrupt Republicans running the show here. The Democrats are just as much in fault as it relates to taking big contributions.
And your follow-up, which is, how do you feel about the weighing of being the position you've been elected to do? We didn't elect you to be a fundraiser.
Yeah. Praise God for that. It's tough. It really is. You're on the phone a lot, asking people to give you money and trying to convince them that this is going to be a successful campaign and you're the right guy for the job. And certainly, I'd like to spend more of my time knocking on folks' doors, talking to them, making sure that we understand. I think people, especially at the state level, I think people don't understand or maybe don't realize that a lot of state representatives and even state senators we want to talk to our constituents. There's a lot of issues that we're not familiar with. There's a lot of things that folks in our communities live and eat and breathe every day, and we're confronted with a lot of issues. And so to hear that input is really, really important. And so it's a tough balancing act between raising money to fund a campaign like this and talking to folks.
Well, that leads me into a question that I had received from one of the audience members. Once elected, will you listen to all constituents and see them in your office regardless of whether you agree or disagree? That's a yes or no, and I'm going to guess that both of you would say yes on that. So let's just go on. How will you prioritize that? How will you make that happen? And I think, Caleb, you get the first one of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's what I've done for the last 4 years, and certainly I think we're in agreement on this. But there is the House district that I represent is very diverse. It's a 50-50 political district. It's a 50-50 split as it relates to a geography of rural and urban for the most part. And for the most part, you can say that the Senate district is about the same. So, you talk to a lot of different folks with a lot of different issues. You have the Sierra Club that comes in right after the ag folks, and a lot of other, contrasts like that. And look, you have to talk to people. I think if we weren't willing to talk to people that we disagree with, then we should get the heck out of Dodge and go be an advocate, and not be a legislator. So I've always made it a priority to talk to people who maybe disagree with me, and if I'm more than willing to have an open mind. If I could be convinced that I'm wrong, it wouldn't be the first time. My wife tells me every day. So.
Stephen Webber, how would you prioritize so you could see folks from all different backgrounds and all different opinions?
So I think I can tell you probably where that question came from, because I've heard 3 complaints about it in the last week, and that from completely different issues in different parts of the political spectrum, and that is that Republican Kurt Schaefer, who represented this area in the Senate prior, or was termed out, ran as a moderate Republican, told everybody he was moderate, and then got down to Jefferson City and just slammed the door in everybody's face and sat in his office and wouldn't come out and talk to people. And I've heard that, I've said literally 3 different times in the last week, and over 100 times, I'm sure, in the last couple of years. And I think we need a clean break from that way of representing the Boone County and Cooper County in the state Senate, and I'm going to be that clean break.
Question for you from one of the audience members, and we start with Stephen Webber. Specifically, how many votes did you miss during each of the terms you served?
I don't know the total number of votes. Everybody misses votes in Jefferson City, so I don't know the total number.
Caleb Rowden, the same question for you.
Stevens missed 940 votes. Look, this will be an issue, and the issue is not. Stevens missed more votes in 1 year than I missed in my entire legislative career of 4 years. Part of the job, and one of the only jobs, is to show up. You show up, you do your job. Look, I understand from the get-go that every vote that I take, probably 50% of the people that I represent are going to disagree with the vote that I take. That's almost a universal truth in the House district. It's probably a universal truth in the Senate district. But you have to show up, and you have to prioritize. When you get paid, as Stephen has, over $280,000 in salary in the time that he's been there, you got to be there. You got to do your job. And I think that is a significant contrast between he and I in this race, and I think it's important for the people of mid-Missouri to know.
Can I get a chance to respond to that?
Yeah, it's my show here to a degree, so I'll let you respond, and then
like
I'll let
was
Caleb Rowden
ambush,
respond to your response if he wants to.
I would ask everybody to go to look at the Tribune tonight. Just look at the Tribune, just today. And if you look at the Tribune tonight, what you'll see is a question about specifically asking Caleb Rowden if he'd repudiate something, and he wouldn't answer the question. And both of us have missed votes, but there is a difference. Caleb routinely runs out of the room to get away from a tough vote. He won't tell people where he would stand on the personhood amendment. We walked off several times and refused to answer reporter questions about that. He walked away and admitted that he did it because of his committee chairman asked him when it came to the circuit breaker tax increase for senior citizens. I tell everybody in this room where I stand on everything. Everybody knows where I stand on anything, and I've never run away from a vote before, and that's a big difference between the two of us.
Caleb Rowden?
He actually ran away from 940, but look, it is a contrast. There's no question. It is a contrast. You make the decision that you are going to be there, and you're going to do the job that you're paid for. Do you miss votes? Absolutely. There's no question about it. The last week of session, I was in the Senate more than I was in the House because we were trying to get stuff done, and we got a lot of stuff done in the last week. But to miss the amount of votes is an intentional decision to say that I'm not going to do what the people of mid-Missouri sent me here to do. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do something else. And I think that is a very important just philosophical difference between how we see this. This is not, I go down there and I do my job and I do it to the best of my ability, but I'm going to show up. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to tell you what I think. You're not going to agree with me all the time, but that's where I'm at, and I promise you I'll show up, and I think that's a difference.
So let me see if I can word this next question. The Senate is strongly controlled by the Republicans. And Caleb Rowden, you get the first crack at this question. So you would go down, if elected as a Republican, replacing a Republican. Boone County and Columbia in particular is known as sort of Democratic in its leanings. How would you make people feel good about you representing them as a Republican of many Democrats? And you've referred to this a couple of times about how you understand that each time you cast a vote is probably 50% like it, 50% don't. But how would you assure those who would say, I'm not sure he represents me in a Republican Senate?
Yeah, so, there's a couple things to remember. Again, this is a 50-50 political seat. I know the people of Columbia want to be represented, and certainly the city leans to the left. But there are, competing interests, and a lot of folks in Cooper County and a lot of folks in Ashland, Centralia, and Hallsville see the world a little bit differently than people in Columbia. And so I think the first thing is you have to engage with those folks, not only with the people, again, the people that you agree with, but the people who you disagree with. I think it has been, my record is very, very clear that when it comes time to stand up to my own party, I'm willing to do it. There is one reason why the University of Missouri didn't get their funding slashed last year, and it wasn't Stephen Webber, who didn't even so much as offer an amendment to restore funding because he knew he'd lose. I thought I'd lose too, and you know what? I did. But then I go back, I went to the Senate, and I got the job done. Those are differences when it comes time to stand up to Republicans, when it comes time to stand up to Democrats, when it comes time to stand up to the executive branch. There's one person who's proven that he can do that, and it's me.
Stephen Webber, same question for you.
This district has been traumatized by Senator Kurt Schaefer over the last 4 years. Individual people have been called out. He's strangled healthcare funding from coming into this district. And 4 years ago, he made the argument that he could be more effective because he was in the majority. And how has that worked out for all of us here in Boone and Cooper counties? Caleb Rowden supports Kurt Schaefer. He supported him for his Attorney General run. He's an extension of Kurt Schaefer and the policies of Kurt Schaefer. And I think we need a clean break. We need a clean change. I actually offered amendments to increase funding for the University of Missouri, straight up 5%, that Caleb Rowden at the time was running for House leadership. He didn't think he needed the people here in Boone County, so he voted no. He voted against my amendment. My amendment failed because he led the effort to stop it. So I think we need to make a clean change, and I think I can do that.
Let's talk about Ed Emery for just a moment. Ed Emery, who was quoted in the Missourian as saying that remarkable reversal of the character of America did not happen overnight. I believe the beginning of degradation in education began with the removal of prayer in the Bible in 62 and 63. One of our audience members came prepared. He typed out this question about education and Senator Emery's approach towards that. He said that in the past, Emery has supported state education dollars being diverted to private and parochial schools. Number two, the privatization of education by having commercial companies establish schools in Missouri. And number three, the expansion of charter schools, when in reality, close to half of the current charter schools are performing subpar. The questioner says, Mid-Missouri is very proud of their K through 12 school districts. As an elected official, how would you protect our schools? And they challenge the Republican leadership regarding these attempts to erode public education in Missouri. Easy question, Stephen Webber. Here we go.
No, I strongly support public schools. I'm opposed to voucher programs. I'm against an unchecked expansion of charter schools. And specifically, talking about Ed Emery, I think of the two of us up here, I'm the only one that clearly came out and said what he said was horrific, it was wrong, it was bullying, it was hate speech, and we need to stand up against it. We shouldn't be tolerated. And when we were asked about that by the Columbia Tribune, I'm the only one that would give a clear answer on that.
Caleb Rowden, your answer, I'm not going to go through that whole question again because it's pretty long.
Yeah, I'm not running for senator in mid-Missouri to justify a statement that a guy from Lamar, Missouri makes. I mean, we're just not going to go down that road. Here's what I do know. There are two different paths that you take as it relates to public education. There's one path where you know that there's going to be some resistance from Republicans, but you work and you bear down and you do the hard work, and you're not content with just saying, I'm going to throw my hands up in the air and I'm going to vote against hundreds of millions of dollars in funding for our K through 12 schools, which my opponent has done. But I'm going to do the tough work of trying to find ways to increase funding, and so that's what I've done. And so in the last 4 years, we've increased K through 12 funding for public schools by $350 million. That's not an imaginary number. That's not made up. That's cold, hard dollars going to our K through 12 schools. That's the Republican supermajority that has done most of that work. And so I think it's important for us to make those distinctions. There's not a difference in our support of public education. We all know that it's important for our community.
This is a question related to the previous one only because of Senator Emery's involvement in this question, and that is the person from the audience says, this is National Coming Out Day. It's a day where many LGBTQ individuals choose to come out to their friends and family. And going back to Senator Emery speaking to the Republican gathering about a week ago, he referred to transgender people and others as having mental illness. Your thought about what he said, and Caleb Rowden, you're first on this.
Yeah, I think there were a couple of pretty high-profile votes that were taken this year that I think my record, as it relates to the LGBT community, I think speaks for itself. Everything that I've done in Jefferson City has been about, you come from a faith, I come from a faith background. And that teaches you to believe that you respect and value people. And that's people from, that you don't agree with politically, people that were born into a different area than you, and people that we may not see the world the same way. But I value those people. I respect those people. And my record speaks for itself. And again, the idea that I'm going to justify every Republican comment as some litmus test for me being able to be the better representative in this district, I think, is ludicrous.
Stephen Webber on the issue.
You show that you value people. You show that you respect people by standing up to bullies and standing up to hate speech. And Caleb Brown's been given 3 or 4 opportunities to do that now, and he won't do it. There are children in this community who face, as you said, National Coming Out Day, a very difficult path forward. They face a lot of challenges, and they face acceptance in society now is better, but it's not where it needs to be. And they shouldn't have elected officials saying that they're mentally ill. And if an elected official says that, they deserve a representative that will stand up for them and won't hide and will just say, that's wrong, don't bully people. That's really all you need to say on that.
We are ready for closing statements now, and we reverse the order of the opening statements for the closing statements. So, Caleb Rowden, you get first closing thought.
Well, again, David, to you and KFRU, League of Women Voters, thank you. This is always a spirited discussion, one that I do look forward to. Stephen and I disagree on a lot of stuff, but I think it's important for us to remember that. And I think I've said this every year we've been here. We live in a great country. It may not feel like it right now, but I think post November 8th, I think we'll get back to that understanding. But we live in a great country because we engage like this, because we talk to each other, because we're willing to respect people with different ideals, people with different walks of life and views of how they see the world. My record in the Missouri House is one that I'm incredibly proud of and one that I am running on. A lot of people don't run on their records anymore because they can't be proud of it. I'm proud of my record. And you have heard about the things that I've accomplished in the Missouri House in the last 4 years, and you're going to continue to hear about it because I think it's important for the people of mid-Missouri to have someone who has proven time and time again that not only can they get things done, but when it comes time to stand up to members of their own party or the other party, they're willing to do it.
Stephen Webber, your closing remarks.
He keeps saying stand up against members of his own party. He won't stand up against hate speech that was spewed here in Boone County yesterday. Bill Clinton in 1982 had a slogan. He said, "Help is on the way." And I want the people of Boone County and Cooper County, people that care about the university, about public education, who have been had their backs or have been just traumatized by Kurt Schaefer over the last 8 years, to know that help is on the way. We're going to have a state senator and some state representatives that are proud of the University of Missouri, that don't bully it, that don't threaten it, that don't call out researchers, that try to provide healthcare access to everybody, that will stand up for kids and will stand up for disabled individuals and for vulnerable communities. That's going to happen. It's going to happen in 4 weeks, and I'm very grateful for all your support, and I'm looking forward to the next 4 years. Thank you.
Stephen Webber and Caleb Rowden, we thank you for being here tonight.